Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the gleaming hallway of Blackwater Defense Industries, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished marble floor. At 42, she had been working as a night janitor at the military contractor's headquarters for 3 years. Her weathered hands gripped the mop handle as she methodically cleaned each office, invisible to the important people who hurried past during the day. The security guards barely acknowledged her presence. To them, she was just another face among the cleaning crew. Maria spoke with a slight accent that made some people assume she was less intelligent than she actually was. Her uniform was always perfectly pressed, her graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her work ethic was impeccable. But nobody bothered to learn her story. During her lunch break, Maria would sit in the employee break room, eating her homemade sandwich, while listening to the younger janitors complain about their treatment. "They act like we're ghosts," complained Tommy, a 20-something college dropout. "Yesterday, Mr. Richardson walked right through my cleaning supplies without even saying, 'Excuse me.'" Maria nodded quietly, remembering similar experiences. Just last week, she had been cleaning the conference room when several executives entered for an important meeting about their latest military contract. One of them, a man in an expensive suit, had waved his hand dismissively. "Can you finish this later? We have serious business to discuss." The way he said serious business made it clear he didn't think anything Maria did could be considered important. The building housed some of the most advanced military technology in the world. Maria cleaned around computer screens, displaying classified information. Past walls lined with photographs of fighter jets and military awards. She had access to areas that required security clearance, but only because someone had to empty the trash cans and vacuum the floors. What nobody knew was that Maria Santos had once held the call sign Viper in the United States Air Force. For 15 years, she had been one of the most skilled A-10 Thunderbolt pilots in active service. The A-10, affectionately known as the Warthog, was a fearsome ground attack aircraft designed to provide close air support to troops on the ground. Maria had flown over 200 combat missions across 3 different deployments, earning numerous commendations for her precision and bravery. Her military records were sealed due to the classified nature of many of her operations. She had been involved in rescue missions behind enemy lines, had provided life-saving air support to surrounded ground troops, and had been instrumental in several covert operations that never made it into official reports. The A-10's distinctive sound had become music to the ears of soldiers who knew that when they heard it, help was coming. Maria's transition to civilian life had been difficult. Like many veterans, she struggled with finding employment that matched her skills and experience. The technical knowledge that made her an exceptional pilot didn't easily translate to civilian job requirements. Potential employers saw a middle-aged woman with a military background but no corporate experience. The detailed explanations of her service record were met with polite smiles and promises to keep her resume on file. After months of rejection, Maria had taken the first job she could find that offered steady income and health insurance. She needed to support her elderly mother and pay for her daughter's college tuition. The position at Blackwater Defense Industries was ironic, given her background, but it was honest work that paid the bills. Every night, as she cleaned the offices of defense contractors and military advisors, Maria heard fragments of conversations about aircraft specifications, mission parameters, and strategic planning. She understood every technical term, every tactical reference, and every piece of military jargon that floated through the halls. But she kept her knowledge to herself, focusing on her cleaning duties and staying invisible. The executives and engineers who worked in the building often discussed complex military aviation problems within earshot of the cleaning staff. They debated engine specifications, weapon systems, and flight characteristics, as if the janitors were furniture. Maria had listened to months of heated arguments about A-10 modifications, replacement aircraft programs, and tactical effectiveness studies. She could have contributed valuable insights to their discussions, but her uniform made her opinion worthless in their eyes. One evening, while cleaning the main conference room, Maria overheard a particularly intense discussion between several senior staff members. They were reviewing footage from a recent training exercise that had gone wrong. An A-10 pilot had made critical errors during a close air support simulation, resulting in what could have been friendly fire casualties in a real combat situation. "This is exactly why we need to accelerate the A-10 replacement program," argued one executive. These aircraft are too difficult to master. The training requirements are excessive, and too many pilots struggle with the precision needed for effective close air support. Maria continued mopping, but her jaw tightened as she listened to their analysis. They were discussing her aircraft, her specialty, without understanding the nuances that made the A-10 such an effective platform in the right hands. Their conclusions were based on incomplete data and a fundamental misunderstanding of the aircraft's capabilities. The next morning brought news that would change everything. A major training exercise was scheduled for the following week at a nearby military base. Blackwater Defense Industries had been contracted to provide consultation and technical support for the exercise, which would involve multiple A-10 squadrons and ground units. It was designed to test new communication protocols and tactical procedures. Maria learned about the exercise while emptying trash cans in the project management office. The staff was excited about the high-profile assignment, but they were also nervous. Several A-10 pilots had been struggling with the new procedures, and there had been communication failures during preliminary tests. The success of the exercise would directly impact Blackwater's future contracts with the military. As the week progressed, the stress level in the building increased dramatically. Maria watched as engineers worked late into the night, trying to solve technical problems that seemed to grow more complex with each passing day. She saw the worry in their faces as they reviewed simulation results and discussed potential solutions. The communication system they were implementing was designed to allow ground controllers to provide more precise guidance to A-10 pilots during close air support missions. However, the pilots were having difficulty adapting to the new protocols, and the ground teams were struggling to communicate effectively with the aircraft. The timing was critical. The margin for error was zero, and everyone's reputation was on the line. Maria continued her nightly routine, but she found herself paying closer attention to the technical discussions. She recognized the problems they were facing because she had encountered similar challenges during her military service. The solutions seemed obvious to her, but she remained silent, knowing that nobody would listen to suggestions from a janitor. Friday evening arrived, and the building was filled with tension. The exercise was scheduled for Monday morning, and despite working around the clock, the technical team had not resolved the critical communication issues. Maria could see the exhaustion and frustration in their faces as she cleaned around their workstations. As she prepared to leave that night, Maria walked past the conference room, where the project leaders were having what appeared to be a crisis meeting. Through the glass walls, she could see charts and diagrams covering the whiteboard, laptops displaying technical specifications, and several people arguing animatedly about potential solutions. The weekend passed slowly for Maria. She spent time with her family, attended church, and tried to maintain her normal routine. But her mind kept returning to the problems she had overheard at work. She knew she could help, but she also knew that offering assistance would likely result in embarrassment or even termination. Her job was to clean, not to provide military consultation. Monday morning would bring the moment of truth. The exercise would proceed as scheduled, with or without solutions to the technical problems. Careers would be made or broken based on the results, and Maria Santos, the invisible janitor with the sealed military records, would continue to empty trash cans and mop floors while watching from the sidelines as others struggled with challenges she could easily overcome. The stage was set for a revelation that would change how everyone at Blackwater Defense Industries viewed the quiet woman who had been walking among them unnoticed for 3 years. But first, the exercise had to begin, and the problems had to reach a crisis point that would force someone to listen to an unlikely voice of expertise. Monday morning arrived gray and overcast, matching the mood inside Blackwater Defense Industries. Maria arrived for her shift to find the building buzzing with nervous energy. The training exercise was set to begin at dawn, and the unresolved technical issues had everyone on edge. The main conference room had been converted into a command center, filled with multiple computer screens, communication equipment, and monitoring devices. Senior staff members hurried back and forth, carrying clipboards and speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Maria began her cleaning routine, but the atmosphere was so tense she could practically feel it in the air. Dr. James Richardson, the senior project manager, stood at the center of the chaos. His usually perfect hair was disheveled. His tie was loosened, and dark circles under his eyes revealed a sleepless weekend. He had built his career on successful military contracts, and this exercise could make or break his reputation with the Pentagon. "Status report," Richardson demanded, as his team gathered around the main conference table. The exercise was scheduled to begin in 2 hours, and they still hadn't solved the critical communication problems that had plagued their testing all week. Sarah Chen, the lead communications engineer, looked up from her laptop with obvious frustration. "We're still getting interference patterns when the A-10 try to communicate with ground control using the new frequency protocols. The pilots are reporting audio distortion that makes it impossible to understand targeting coordinates." "What about the backup system?" Richardson asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be good. "The backup has the same problem," replied Marcus Williams, the senior technical advisor. "We've run diagnostics on every piece of equipment, checked all the software configurations, and even brought in specialists from the manufacturer. Nothing we've tried has eliminated the interference." Maria pushed her cleaning cart past the conference room, moving slowly as she listened to their discussion. She had heard similar problems described by pilots during her military service. The issue wasn't with the equipment or software. It was with the frequency selection and timing protocols. The solution was actually quite simple, but it required understanding how A-10 communication systems interacted with ground-based radio equipment during high-stress combat situations. "Sir," interrupted Lisa Martinez, the project coordinator, "we just received word from the base. The exercise commanders want to proceed as scheduled. They're saying that postponement would be too expensive and would disrupt training schedules for multiple units." Richardson's face went pale. "They want to proceed with communication systems that don't work properly? That's insane. Someone could get hurt if pilots can't hear targeting instructions clearly." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. This wasn't just about contract success anymore. It was about safety. During close air support missions, precise communication was literally a matter of life and death. Even in a training exercise, miscommunication could lead to serious accidents. Maria finished cleaning the adjacent office and moved to the break room, but she could still hear the increasingly desperate conversation from the conference room. The technical team was running out of time and options. They had tried every conventional solution they could think of, but none had worked. As the clock approached the exercise start time, Richardson made a decision that surprised everyone. "We're going to monitor the exercise remotely and provide real-time technical support if problems arise. Maybe we can find a solution on the fly." The team quickly set up additional monitoring equipment and established communication links with the exercise control tower. Large screens displayed real-time feeds from the training area, showing A-10 aircraft on the runway preparing for takeoff. The pilots looked confident and professional, unaware of the technical problems that might soon put them at risk. "Exercise Thunderbolt is commencing," announced the voice from the control tower through their communication system. "First wave of 8 seconds is cleared for takeoff." Maria paused her cleaning to watch the screens as the distinctive twin-engine aircraft rolled down the runway and lifted into the morning sky. She felt a familiar surge of excitement and pride watching the 8 seconds perform. These were her aircraft, her squadron's legacy, even though she could never tell anyone about her connection to them. The first phase of the exercise went smoothly. The A-10 performed routine maneuvers and conducted simulated attacks on predetermined targets. But as the exercise progressed to more complex scenarios involving close coordination with ground units, the communication problems began to manifest. "Control tower to Blackwater monitoring station," came the urgent voice through their speakers. "We're experiencing communication difficulties with the lead A-10 flight. The pilots are reporting severe audio distortion when receiving targeting coordinates from ground control." Richardson leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. "Can you patch us into their communication frequency?" "Affirmative." Switching to exercise channel Alpha. Suddenly, the room filled with the sound of frustrated pilots trying to communicate with ground controllers. Through heavy static and distortion, they could hear fragments of conversation. "Repeat coordinates. Unable to copy." "Say again. Target designation." Quote, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The A-10 pilots were flying in a high-stress environment, trying to provide close air support to simulated ground troops, but they couldn't clearly hear the targeting information they needed. In a real combat situation, this would have been disastrous. Ground control to Viper 1-1. Abort current attack run. Communications compromised. Return to holding pattern. Maria froze when she heard the call sign, Viper 1-1. That had been her squadron designation during her last deployment. The pilot flying that aircraft was probably someone she had trained with or who had learned from her experience. The thought of that pilot struggling with problems she could solve made her hands clench involuntarily. Sarah Chen was frantically typing on her laptop, trying different frequency configurations and software settings. "I'm attempting to modify the signal processing algorithms in real time," she announced. "But I need several minutes to upload and test each change." "We don't have several minutes," Richardson replied tersely. "The exercise commanders are already asking if they should abort the entire mission. If we can't solve this now, Blackwater's reputation with the military is finished." The room watched in tense silence as the A-10 seconds circled overhead, burning fuel while waiting for a solution. Maria could hear the frustration in the pilots' voices as they repeatedly attempted to establish clear communication with ground control. She knew exactly what they were experiencing. The helpless feeling of being ready to complete a mission, but being unable to receive the information they needed to proceed safely. Control tower to monitoring station. Came another update. The pilots are requesting permission to switch to emergency backup frequencies, but that would compromise the security protocols you're testing. Richardson ran his hands through his hair. If they switch to backup frequencies, the entire exercise becomes worthless. We're supposed to be validating the new secure communication system, not proving that the old system works better. Marcus Williams looked up from his diagnostic equipment. "Sir, I hate to say this, but I don't think we can solve this problem remotely. The interference pattern is too complex, and we don't have enough time to run proper diagnostics." The weight of failure settled over the room like a heavy blanket. 3 years of development work, millions of dollars in investment, and countless hours of preparation were about to be wasted because of a technical problem they couldn't solve. Worse, the military's confidence in Blackwater's capabilities would be severely damaged. Maria stood in the break room doorway, watching the crisis unfold. She could see the defeat in Richardson's posture, the frustration in Sarah's rapid typing, and the worry in everyone's faces. The solution to their problem was relatively simple. They needed to adjust the transmission timing to account for the A-10's unique communication architecture and modify the frequency selection algorithm to avoid interference with the aircraft's defensive systems. But she was just a janitor. Even if she spoke up, would anyone listen? Would they believe that the woman who emptied their trash cans every night actually understood their complex technical problem better than their team of engineers and specialists? The voice from the control tower crackled through the speakers again. "Monitoring station. We need a decision. The flight commander is requesting immediate guidance. Should we proceed with the exercise using backup systems or abort the mission?" Richardson looked around the room at his team, searching for any sign of hope or inspiration. His eyes briefly met Maria's through the doorway, but he looked through her as if she were invisible. She was just part of the cleaning staff, irrelevant to the critical decision he had to make. "Give us 60 more seconds," Richardson told the control tower. "We're making one final attempt." Maria knew that 60 seconds wouldn't be enough time for conventional solutions, but it might be enough time for her to make a decision that would change her life forever. She could remain invisible and watch the exercise fail, protecting her job, but knowing she could have prevented the disaster. Or she could step forward and risk everything by revealing knowledge that would shock everyone in that room. The clock was ticking. The A-10 seconds were circling overhead, and the pilots she had once flown alongside were waiting for guidance. Maria Santos, the invisible janitor with the sealed military records, faced the moment when she would have to choose between safety and service, between hiding and helping. The radio crackled with static, and somewhere above the clouds, aircraft that had once answered to her voice were waiting for someone to solve a problem that was destroying their mission. The next few seconds would determine whether Maria remained a ghost in the hallways or stepped forward to reclaim her identity as one of the most skilled A-10 pilots who had ever served her country. Maria Santos took a deep breath and stepped into the conference room. Her cleaning cart remained in the hallway as she approached the table where Richardson and his team were staring helplessly at their equipment. The room fell silent as everyone noticed the janitor walking toward their crisis command center. "Excuse me," Maria said quietly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I believe I can help solve your communication problem." Richardson looked up with irritation and disbelief. "Ma'am, we're in the middle of a critical military operation. This really isn't the time for... The interference you're experiencing is caused by frequency overlap with the A-10's missile warning system," Maria interrupted, her voice gaining confidence. "The timing protocols you've programmed create a resonance pattern that conflicts with the aircraft's defensive electronics. You need to adjust the transmission sequence by 200 milliseconds and shift the primary frequency up by 15 megahertz." The room erupted in shocked silence. Sarah Chen's fingers stopped moving on her keyboard. Marcus Williams stared with his mouth slightly open, and Richardson's expression changed from irritation to complete bewilderment. The janitor, who had been invisible for 3 years, was speaking fluent military aviation technical language. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" Richardson demanded, though his tone had shifted from dismissive to curious. "How do you know about A-10 defensive systems?" Maria straightened her shoulders. And for the first time in 3 years, she allowed her military bearing to show through her janitor's uniform. "My name is Maria Santos. My former call sign was Viper. I flew A-10 Thunderbolts for 15 years in the United States Air Force, including over 200 combat missions." The silence in the room became profound. Through the speakers, they could still hear the frustrated voices of pilots circling overhead, waiting for guidance. But everyone in the conference room was staring at the woman they had walked past countless times without a second glance. "That's impossible," whispered Lisa Martinez. You work in maintenance. I clean your offices," Maria corrected. "But before that, I was one of the most experienced A-10 pilots in active service. My records are classified due to the nature of my missions, which is why my background didn't appear in your employment screening." Richardson was struggling to process this revelation, but the urgency of the situation forced him to focus on the immediate crisis. "Can you actually fix our communication problem?" "Yes," Maria replied without hesitation. "But I need access to your frequency management software, and I need it now. Those pilots have been circling for 12 minutes, which means they're burning through their fuel reserves." Sarah Chen looked at Richardson, waiting for guidance. He stared at Maria for several long seconds, studying her face as if seeing her for the first time. The confident, authoritative tone in her voice was completely different from the quiet deference she had shown as a janitor. "Do it," Richardson decided. "Sarah, give her access to your workstation." Maria moved quickly to the computer terminal, her fingers flying over the keyboard with practiced efficiency. She navigated through complex menu systems and technical displays with the ease of someone who had used similar equipment for years. The room watched in fascination as the invisible janitor transformed before their eyes into a skilled technical specialist. "Control tower, this is Blackwater Monitoring Station." Richardson spoke into his headset. "We're implementing an immediate fix to the communication system. Please stand by for frequency modification." Maria worked with intense concentration, modifying transmission protocols and adjusting frequency parameters. She understood the A-10's systems at a level that went far beyond theoretical knowledge. She had lived with these aircraft, depended on them for survival, and knew their quirks and capabilities like a musician knows their instrument. "There," she announced after 90 seconds of rapid typing. "Try the communication link now. The interference should be eliminated." Sarah Chen ran a quick diagnostic check on her monitoring equipment. "Signal strength is optimal, frequency separation looks good, and the interference pattern has disappeared completely. Control tower to Viper 1-1. Richardson called through the radio. "Test communication on updated frequency. How do you copy?" 2. The response came through crystal clear, without any static or distortion. "Control tower, this is Viper 1-1. Communication is perfect. We copy you 5x5. Ready to proceed with exercise." A collective sigh of relief filled the room. The crisis had been averted, the exercise could continue, and Blackwater's reputation was saved. But everyone's attention remained focused on Maria, who was calmly closing the software applications she had used to solve their problem. "How did you know exactly what to do?" asked Marcus Williams, still struggling to comprehend what he had witnessed. Maria smiled slightly, the first genuine smile many of them had ever seen from her. "I spent 15 years flying A-10 seconds in combat situations. I've experienced every type of communication failure, equipment malfunction, and technical challenge these aircraft can present. The problem you were facing is actually quite common when you try to integrate new communication systems with existing aircraft electronics. But why didn't you ever say anything?" Sarah Chen asked. "We've been struggling with A-10 technical issues for months. You could have helped us avoid so many problems." The question hung in the air as Maria considered how to respond. She looked around the room at the faces of people who had treated her as invisible for 3 years, who had discussed complex military problems in her presence without ever considering that she might have valuable insights to contribute. "Would you have listened?" she asked simply. 3 years ago, when you saw a middle-aged woman applying for a janitor position, would you have believed that she was a decorated combat pilot? When you walked past me in the hallway, did you ever wonder if the person emptying your trash can might have the expertise you needed?" The uncomfortable silence that followed answered her question more effectively than words ever could. Richardson shifted in his chair, remembering the countless times he had dismissed her presence, had spoken about military matters as if she weren't there, had treated her as part of the building's furniture, rather than a human being with skills and experience. Through the speakers, they could hear the exercise proceeding smoothly. The A-10 pilots were communicating clearly with ground control, executing complex maneuvers, and demonstrating the effectiveness of the updated communication system. The technical problem that had threatened to derail the entire operation was now completely resolved. "Maria," Richardson said carefully, "I owe you an apology. We all do. We made assumptions about you based on your job title, and those assumptions were completely wrong." "You weren't wrong about my job," Maria replied. "I am a janitor. I clean your offices, empty your trash, and maintain this building. I needed this employment, and I've tried to do good work for you. But I'm also a veteran, with 15 years of specialized experience that happen to be relevant to your crisis today." Lisa Martinez spoke up hesitantly. "Why did you take a job as a janitor if you have such advanced technical knowledge?" Maria's expression became more serious as she explained her situation. "Finding civilian employment as a veteran isn't as easy as people think. My military experience is highly specialized, and much of my service record is classified. Potential employers see a woman in her 40s, with no corporate experience and extensive time overseas. They assume I can't adapt to civilian work environments." She paused, collecting her thoughts before continuing. "I have an elderly mother who requires medical care, and a daughter in college. I needed steady employment with health insurance, and this job provided both. I've been supporting my family while looking for opportunities to use my technical skills, but those opportunities are rare." The room absorbed this explanation in silence. Several staff members looked uncomfortable as they realized how their preconceptions had blinded them to Maria's capabilities and circumstances. "Control tower to monitoring station," came the update through their speakers. "Exercise Thunderbolt is proceeding perfectly. All communication systems are functioning flawlessly. The pilots want to know who fixed their radio problems so they can buy that person a drink." Maria laughed genuinely for the first time since entering the conference room. "Tell them Viper sends her regards," she said with evident pride. Richardson stared at her with new understanding. "Viper? They know your call sign?" "Some of them probably do," Maria explained. "The A-10 community is relatively small, and experienced pilots tend to know each other's reputations. I trained many of the pilots who are flying today, and I served alongside others during various deployments." Sarah Chen had been quietly reviewing Maria's technical modifications on her computer. "These frequency adjustments are brilliant," she announced. "They're not just solving our immediate problem. They're actually optimizing the entire communication system. Our signal clarity has improved by 30% across all channels." The implications of this discovery were beginning to sink in for everyone in the room. They had been employing one of the military's most experienced A-10 pilots as a janitor, walking past her every day while struggling with technical problems she could have solved immediately. "Maria," Richardson said slowly, "I think we need to have a serious conversation about your role in this company. Would you be interested in a position that actually utilizes your expertise?" When quote, I. Maria looked around the room at the faces that had finally seen her as more than just cleaning staff. The irony wasn't lost on her that it had taken a crisis to make her visible to people who had ignored her for years. "I would be very interested in that conversation," she replied. "But first, let's make sure this exercise concludes successfully. I'd like to monitor the communication systems for the remainder of the operation to ensure there are no additional problems." As the morning progressed, Maria worked alongside the technical team, providing insights and suggestions that improved their systems far beyond what they had thought possible. Her practical knowledge complemented their theoretical understanding, creating solutions that neither could have achieved alone. The exercise concluded flawlessly, with the military commanders praising Blackwater for the exceptional performance of their communication systems. The A-10 pilots completed all their assigned missions with perfect coordination, and the ground controllers reported the clearest, most reliable communications they had experienced in years. When the final reports came in, Richardson gathered his team around the conference table where the crisis had unfolded hours earlier. Maria stood with them now as an equal contributor. No longer invisible, no longer dismissed. "Today we learned an important lesson about assumptions and recognition," Richardson addressed the group. "We also discovered that one of the military's most experienced A-10 pilots has been working among us, unrecognized, for 3 years. I think it's time to correct that oversight." He turned to Maria with genuine respect in his voice. "Would you consider joining our technical team as a senior aviation consultant? I believe your expertise could be invaluable to our future projects." Maria smiled, thinking of her daughter's college tuition, her mother's medical bills, and her own desire to contribute meaningfully to work that mattered. "I accept," she said, "but I have one condition." "What's that?" Richardson asked. "I want to continue working night shifts occasionally," Maria said with a slight grin. "You'd be surprised what you can learn about a company by listening to conversations while people think you're invisible." The room erupted in laughter, and for the first time in 3 years, Maria Santos felt truly seen and valued for who she really was. Above them, the A-10 seconds that had answered to her voice commands were returning to base, their mission successful thanks to the janitor who had never really been just a janitor at all.